The gift bag slipped from my hands, crashing to the tiled floor. Tissue paper fluttered like torn wings, scattering across the cashier's counter. All around me, the store buzzed with ordinary life, beeping scanners, murmured conversations, children tugging at their parents' sleeves. But my world had just stopped. Because in that split second, the cashier's grip tightened on my wrist. Her nails pressed crescents into my skin as she leaned closer, voice shaking but urgent. "Don't go to the party." Her eyes, wide, terrified, were nothing like the casual smile she'd worn seconds ago. And for one fleeting moment, I thought she was playing some strange joke. But the tremor in her voice cut through my doubt like glass breaking. Before I could ask what she meant, the line behind me stirred impatiently. Someone coughed. Another muttered. The cashier let go, her hands suddenly retreating as if burned. She forced a smile, scanning the last item. And across the store, I caught a glimpse of a familiar face. Smug, certain, convinced they had already won. They thought this would break me, but they had no idea what was coming. The moment the cashier's warning echoed in my ears, my mind jolted back to the rhythm of my ordinary life. The life I had worked so hard to build for my daughter. I wasn't rich. I wasn't powerful. I wasn't the type of person who drew attention in a crowd. Most days I blended into the quiet routine of our neighborhood, an older suburb where fences leaned with age and porches carried stories written in chipped paint. My pride wasn't in appearances, but in small consistencies, making breakfast before school, double-checking homework, and tucking a blanket snugly around my daughter's shoulders every night. Her name was Emily, 9 years old, with hair that caught the sunlight like warm copper. She was the reason I stayed patient at my job, the reason I endured when life pressed too hard. Every corner of our little home held traces of her, drawings taped to the fridge, shoes abandoned by the front door, a piggy bank on her dresser shaped like a smiling elephant. That elephant had become more than a coin jar. It was a symbol of everything we were saving for: stability, safety, a future that couldn't be taken away. But stability has a way of attracting envy. Our neighborhood was ruled, in an unspoken way, by one person, Diane Mercer. She wasn't elected to anything, not officially, but somehow her voice carried the weight of law. If there was a bake sale, she decided who baked the pies. If there was a block party, she organized it and positioned herself as queen of the event. And if there was recognition to be given, whose yard looked best, whose child performed brightest, Diane made sure the spotlight angled toward her circle of favorites. She thrived on control, and she thrived even more on the quiet submission of people like me. At first, I tried to avoid her web. I kept my head down at homeowners' meetings, nodded politely when she complained about other families, and contributed what I could: extra cupcakes, a folding table, volunteering to clean up long after the fun had ended. My hope was that if I gave more than I took, I could stay invisible. But invisibility, it turned out, wasn't what Diane wanted from me. She wanted proof that she was above me. It began with small things. At one barbecue, when Emily shyly handed her a drawing she'd made of the neighborhood, Diane glanced at it, smirked, and tossed it on the table like a discarded napkin. The laughter that followed from her little entourage stung far deeper than I let Emily see. I picked up the drawing, smoothed the crumpled corner, and told my daughter it was beautiful, because it was. But the humiliation wasn't for Emily. It was for me. A message. Don't think your effort matters here. I swallowed it down, the way I always did. I told myself it was just pettiness. Yet, like drops of acid, those moments added up, burning slowly, quietly. Every time Diane laughed a little too loudly at my expense, every time she twisted a small kindness into a reminder of her power, I felt it. And yet, life continued. Mornings still began with Emily's chatter at the breakfast table. Evenings still ended with her soft breathing as she drifted to sleep. These routines steadied me, like rails on a bridge, keeping me from tumbling under the weight of Diane's petty dominance. What I didn't realize then was that Diane wasn't satisfied with small victories. She needed bigger stages, louder humiliations. I still remember the first sting that drew blood. It was at the winter holiday gift exchange, a tradition where every family contributed a present to be drawn at random. I had saved for weeks, putting aside a little at a time, until I could afford a polished wooden chess set. The kind with hand-carved knights and pawns, each piece smooth beneath your fingers, weighted so the board felt alive when you played. When the gifts were opened, Diane made sure to direct the flow. She announced who got what, drawing attention with theatrical flair. When the chess set appeared, she raised her eyebrows, pretending to study it with interest. Then, in a tone dripping with mockery, she said loud enough for everyone to hear, Not really a kid's gift, is it? Seems like someone forgot what this event was for." Her friends chuckled. Heat rose in my face. Emily's small hand gripped mine, and I knew she felt my embarrassment as sharply as I did. That night, after everyone left, I sat in the quiet of our living room, staring at the empty box where the chess set had been. On the mantel above, a family photo smiled down at me, Emily, and the elephant piggy bank in the background. I told myself it was just another drop of acid, nothing more. But deep down, I knew it was foreshadowing. Diane wasn't done. She was only getting started, and soon her cruelty would move from pettiness to something far darker. The weeks after the holiday gift exchange were heavy with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the sort that buzzed under the skin, like static before a storm. Every time I walked past a neighbor's yard, I caught snippets of laughter that seemed to trail off when I appeared. Eyes flicked toward me, then away. Smiles that once seemed friendly were now tight, cautious, as if my very presence carried a warning label. Diane was spreading her poison. It started subtly. A neighbor mentioned, almost casually, that Diane had said I was difficult to work with. Another told me they'd heard I was too proud to accept help. Lies, sharpened into needles, weaving their way into conversations until people began to treat them as truth. What cut deepest wasn't the gossip itself. It was the way it seeped into every corner of my life. The school fundraiser, the community cleanup, even the simple matter of borrowing a ladder from the house across the street. Doors that once opened easily now stayed closed. Excuses falling like chains between me and the people I thought were allies. At night, the stress clawed at me. Sleep came in fragments, restless dozes interrupted by jolts of worry. My body carried it too, a constant tightness across my shoulders, a stomach that twisted every time the phone rang, a pounding in my temples that no amount of coffee could wash away. Emily noticed. Children always do. She'd ask why I was so tired, why I sighed so much. I'd smile and tell her I was fine, but even I didn't believe the lie. The cruelest part of Diane's campaign wasn't just the isolation. It was the way she used my own silence against me. I had always believed that patience, restraint, and quiet endurance were strengths. But to her, they were invitations. Every time I failed to fight back, she pushed harder, emboldened. She began targeting Emily in small ways, never directly, but always with a shadow of intent. At the spring carnival, when the children lined up for prizes, Diane made a point of overlooking Emily's hand in the crowd, choosing others until my daughter's smile dimmed. At school, she whispered to other parents, ensuring Emily wasn't invited to a birthday or a play date. Watching my daughter's light falter, that was worse than anything Diane had done to me. One night, as I sat at the kitchen table staring at unpaid bills and the cracked ceramic mug in my hand, I wondered how much more I could take. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock, Emily's soft snore drifting down the hallway. It all pressed down on me like a weight I couldn't shift. That was the moment the thought entered my mind. Maybe Diane has already won. But life has a strange way of sending us lifelines when we're closest to drowning. It came one evening at the grocery store. My cart was half filled with basics, milk, bread, the cheapest pasta I could find. I turned down the paper goods aisle and nearly collided with a woman I hadn't spoken to in months, Clara, one of the quieter neighbors. She paused, studying me with eyes that weren't mocking or wary, but concerned. "I've been meaning to ask," she said softly. "Are you doing okay?" I know what Diane's been saying, but not everyone believes her. The words hit me like sunlight piercing through a storm cloud. I must have looked stunned, because Clara gave a small smile and added, "She does this to anyone she sees as a threat. Don't think you're the first. You're just the only one strong enough not to bow to her." I swallowed hard, feeling something I hadn't in months, the spark of being seen, of not being entirely alone. We talked for a few minutes, nothing earth-shattering, just groceries, the weather, how quickly the school year was flying by. But underneath it all was a quiet message. I wasn't as isolated as Diane wanted me to believe. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept without waking in a cold sweat. And when I rose the next morning, I felt a shift inside me. A small one, fragile, but real. Because Clara's words echoed in my mind like a mantra. She does this to anyone she sees as a threat. I wasn't a victim. I was a target, because I mattered more than Diane wanted me to realize. And that was the first time someone reminded me I wasn't alone. If gossip was Diane's warm-up, then her next move was war. It began with a letter, official, cold, typed in a font that seemed designed to intimidate. The HOA formally requested that I attend a disciplinary hearing about my pattern of disruptive behavior. Disruptive. The word seared into me. I had spent my entire life avoiding disruption, bending myself into quiet compliance just to keep peace. And now that very silence was being weaponized against me. The hearing was set for a Wednesday evening in the community center, a squat brick building that smelled of disinfectant and old carpet. When I walked in, Diane sat at the center of a long folding table, flanked by two board members who looked less like leaders and more like her loyal shadows. Papers were stacked neatly before her. She tapped them with theatrical precision, every gesture saying, "This is my stage. I own this room." Neighbors trickled in, murmuring as they took their seats. Some avoided my eyes, others glanced at me with pity, as if already convinced the outcome was sealed. Diane began. Her voice was smooth, authoritative, dripping with false concern. "There have been numerous complaints," she said, pretending to shuffle papers. "Disturbances, inappropriate behavior at community events, and even questions about your ability to contribute positively to our neighborhood." Each word was calculated to sting. She referenced the holiday chess set, twisting it into proof that I was inconsiderate. She mentioned my supposed refusal to volunteer, despite the countless hours I'd spent cleaning up after events. She even implied, without saying it outright, that Emily's struggles to fit in were somehow my fault. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The walls seemed to close in, the fluorescent lights buzzing like hornets above my head. I could see Emily's drawing in my mind, the one Diane had mocked at the barbecue, and I felt the same sting of humiliation flooding back. But then I remembered Clara's words. She does this to anyone she sees as a threat. Threat, not victim. Something inside me shifted. I straightened in my chair, folded my hands, and when Diane finally asked if I had anything to say, I spoke with a calmness that surprised even me. "I keep records," I said simply. The room stirred. From my bag, I pulled out a slim binder, months of receipts, emails, and notes I had quietly saved. Not out of strategy, but out of necessity. Every bake sale donation, every time I stayed late to clean, every small proof of the effort I had given without recognition. I laid the binder on the table, the sound sharp in the silence. If anyone would like to review the truth, it's here. Diane's smile faltered. Just slightly, but I caught it, the crack in her mask. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to argue point by point. The evidence was there, solid and undeniable, and the board members knew it. One of them shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Another cleared his throat but didn't meet Diane's eyes. For a moment, the power tilted. But Diane wasn't one to surrender. She leaned forward, her voice sharpening. Records can be fabricated. What we're really discussing here is community trust, and I don't think... Her words cut short when a voice rose from the back. It was Clara. She had slipped in quietly, unnoticed. Now she stood, her arms crossed, gaze steady. "I trust her," Clara said firmly. "I've seen the work she does." "More than you ever give credit for." The air in the room shifted again. A murmur spread, neighbors whispering, exchanging glances. It wasn't an uprising, not yet, but it was doubt. And doubt was the one thing Diane couldn't control. Her face tightened, though she tried to mask it with another smile. "Well," she said, voice syrupy, "we'll take this under advisement." The meeting ended without resolution, but the lines had been drawn. Diane wasn't satisfied with partial victories. Her pride had been nicked, and for someone like her, a nick was a mortal wound. As I walked out into the night air, the binder clutched under my arm. I felt the cold wind bite my skin. But beneath it was a current of something else, resolve. Diane thought she still had control. She didn't. And that realization was going to drive her into far darker moves than I had ever imagined. Diane didn't retreat. She regrouped. Within days of the HOA meeting, whispers turned into shouts. Neighbors who once waved now crossed the street. Parents pulled their children away when Emily tried to play at the park. Someone even slipped an anonymous note under my door. "Maybe you should move. People like you don't belong here." The words burned, but I recognized the handwriting. Clumsy block letters, but unmistakably Diane's. She didn't want me gone. Not really. She wanted me broken. She wanted me to bend until I snapped and admitted her superiority. And if I didn't, she would try to erase me. The smear campaign grew vicious. Diane told anyone who would listen that I had anger problems, that I was unstable, even hinting that Emily might not be safe under my care. It wasn't just gossip anymore. It was a dagger aimed at the one place she knew I couldn't ignore. I found myself staring at the elephant piggy bank on Emily's dresser late at night. The soft pink ceramic, the little smile painted beneath its trunk. Inside were quarters, dimes, the occasional crumpled dollar Emily proudly contributed after doing chores. To anyone else, it was just a child's toy. But to me, it was proof. Proof of everything I'd been building, of what I refused to let Diane take. It reminded me that I wasn't powerless. So I began to fight, not with anger, but with strategy. I documented everything. Every slight glance, every rumor I could trace, every interaction Diane twisted. I saved texts, emails, screenshots. I wrote down times, dates, witnesses. My binder grew thicker, heavier. It became more than paper. It became armor. Clara helped, quietly at first, then more boldly. She'd slip me notes of what she overheard, messages Diane spread behind closed doors. She encouraged me to take care of myself too, to eat, to sleep, to remember that resilience wasn't just about evidence, but about spirit. Some nights we'd sit on my porch after Emily went to bed, sipping tea, sharing stories. I realized Diane hadn't stolen the entire community. She had simply scared most into silence. But silence wouldn't last forever. One afternoon, while walking back from the mailbox, I noticed a small group of neighbors whispering at the end of the street. They glanced at me, then quickly looked away. When I reached my front porch, I saw why. Spray painted in thick red letters across my garage door were the words, "Liar. Fraud." Emily's gasp behind me cut deeper than the vandalism itself. She clutched the elephant piggy bank in her arms. She'd been holding it, bringing it outside as if even a child understood symbols of safety needed protection. Tears stung my eyes, but I forced calm into my voice. "It's just paint," I said softly. "Paint washes away." But inside, rage simmered. Diane had crossed from whispers to war, and I wasn't going to let her write my story in red paint. I filed a police report. I showed them the evidence I'd been gathering. While they couldn't prove Diane had been the one with the spray can, they listened. One officer even said, "You've got more documentation than most people ever bring in. Keep this up. It matters. It mattered." Each page in my binder, each coin in Emily's piggy bank, each word Clara whispered, they were building toward something larger, a reckoning Diane didn't see coming. The more she tried to control the narrative, the more cracks appeared in her empire. I noticed it in small things. A neighbor hesitating before nodding at her gossip. A board member looking uncomfortable when she spoke too loudly, her own husband barely masking his exhaustion when she launched into yet another tirade. Her power wasn't absolute. It was fragile, held together by fear. And fear, once broken, can't be mended. I knew then, the day of reckoning was coming, and no one could stop it. The day of reckoning came on a gray Saturday morning. The community center parking lot was already full when I pulled in, Emily's small hand gripping mine. She insisted on coming, and though part of me wanted to shield her, I knew this was her story too. Inside, the air was charged, like a storm about to break. Rows of folding chairs faced the long table where Diane sat, perfectly composed, her smile stretched thin and smug. She tapped her pen against a neat stack of papers, her script for the show she thought she was directing. Neighbors filled the seats, whispering. The HOA had called the meeting an emergency session to address ongoing issues. But everyone knew this was Diane's stage. She had painted me as unstable, dishonest, even dangerous. Today she expected to watch me crumble under the weight of her accusations. But I wasn't walking into her play. I was bringing my own. The meeting began with Diane's voice, smooth, commanding, dripping with false sympathy. She listed her accusations, my supposed hostility, my refusal to cooperate, even hinting once again that Emily wasn't safe in my care. Gasps rippled through the crowd at that, the cruelty of it slicing sharper than any blade. I felt Emily's fingers tighten around mine. That was all I needed. When Diane finally leaned back, confident she had sealed the coffin, I stood. My voice was calm, steady, carrying across the room. For months I've stayed quiet. I thought patience would speak louder than lies, but silence has only given her room to grow bolder. Today, that ends. I laid my binder on the table with a sharp, final sound. Pages of emails, receipts, texts, photographs. All dated, organized, undeniable. The room leaned in as I flipped it open, pointing to specific entries. The volunteer hours, the bake sales, the vandalism report, the anonymous note in Diane's handwriting, compared side by side with a card she'd written for the HOA. Gasps spread. Murmurs grew. Faces turned toward Diane, her mask already starting to crack. And then I pulled out one last piece. Emily's drawing from months ago, the one Diane had mocked and discarded. I held it up so everyone could see the smoothed-out paper, the bright colors of houses and trees, the little figures holding hands. "This," I said, my voice breaking just slightly, "is what we're fighting over. Belonging, kindness, a community worth giving to. My daughter believed she was part of that. Diane wanted her to believe otherwise." Silence filled the room, a heavy, electric silence. All eyes turned to Diane. Her hands trembled on the table, the pen tapping faster now. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, her mask slipping. "Anyone can fake records. Anyone can twist a story." But her voice cracked, and once a crack forms, a collapse isn't far behind. Neighbors began to shift uncomfortably, whispering among themselves. One board member cleared his throat, unable to hide his unease. Another muttered, "We've gone too far." Diane's composure shattered. She slammed her pen down, her voice rising shrill. "You're all fools if you believe this. She's nothing. She's—" Her words broke against the silence. Her empire of fear was crumbling, stone by stone, and everyone could see it. I took Emily's hand and spoke one final time, my voice low but carrying. "I don't want apologies. I want change." The words hung in the air, undeniable, immovable. Diane sank back into her chair, her face pale, her body trembling. For the first time, she wasn't in control, and for the first time, I was no longer silent. After the meeting, Diane's mask shattered. Neighbors drifted from her, silence replacing fear. I rebuilt, framing Emily's drawing, filling her elephant piggy bank with hope. Clara and others stepped in, repainting my garage, inviting Emily back into laughter. Diane still lingered, brittle smiles hiding her collapse, but her power was gone. On our porch one evening, Emily whispered, "I'm glad you didn't give up." And I knew. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Have you ever faced favoritism, betrayal, or the abuse of power? Have you ever watched someone try to silence you, convinced they could strip away your worth? If so, then you already know what I learned. Silence doesn't protect you. Truth does. I want to hear from you. Share your story in the comments. Tell us how you endured, how you rose above it, and what strength you found on the other side. Because every voice matters here. And remember this: worth isn't something they give you. It's something you claim for yourself. So when the world tries to tell you to stay small, I hope you remember my story. And I hope you remember to stand tall.